Hello, I'm Sandy Johnson, President of the National Press Foundation, coming to you from the Evelyn Y. Davis Studios. Today, we're talking about business. How do companies transform and compete in the digital age? I'll explain in a minute.
The National Press Foundation is a nonprofit dedicated to helping journalists cover complex topics with depth and accuracy. Our mission includes journalists around the U.S. and around the world.
With me today is Thomas Lee, a business reporter at the San Francisco Chronicle. We were fortunate to have Tom as an NPF Fellow in our U.S.-China training in Shanghai. Today we're talking with Tom about his book, Rebuilding Empires, How Best Buy and Other Retailers Are Transforming and Competing in the Digital Age of Retailing. A timely topic. Thank you for joining us, Tom.
Thanks for having me.
So, Best Buy had an unusual genesis, a tornado. What happened?
Well, the founder of Best Buy, back then it was known as the Sound of Music, music stores, and he was out with his family one day, and then he heard on the news that there was a tornado coming into the Twin Cities. And so he ran back to it because it was heading for Roosevelt, where one of his stores were. And sure enough, by the time he got there, the tornado had taken out the store and literally destroyed everything. So that store actually was one of his most profitable and largest selling type stores. So he didn't have any business interruption insurance, so he felt like he had to recoup his losses somehow. So he got in his idea that he would have a tent sale in which he would try to sell whatever was left. So as he's trying to do the tent sale, he realized that there wasn't enough left from that store. So he started raiding all his other stores, taking like overstock items, things that out of things that weren't the newest models anymore. And he just put together a hodgepodge of stuff. And he put out ads in papers that said, "Come to the tent sale, Best Buy." You see, Best Buy. There he came up with the idea. So when we put it together, an astonishing thing happened. It was that everyone came. It was the craziest thing ever. The way he described it, there was like a line of people stretching out, cars everywhere, and people just dove into it. It's like a electronics flea market, I suppose, if that's the best description for it. And he had so many customers that he decided to do another tent sale the next day, and that sold out. His wife at the time even bought pizzas for everybody to sign up people for credit back then. So it came to his, he thought about it. It's like, what was going on here, right? And then he just wanted to see if he could somehow recreate that same kind of atmosphere. This anything goes, I'm going to grab stuff and feel like I'm going to get a good deal, and how all these people that excited and psyched about all the merchandise it was selling. And that was the idea behind Best Buy.
And how did he parlay that into a national empire?
Well, I think that the thing to know about Dick Schultz is that I think even he would admit it, and I think he has admitted, I don't think he was particularly good at strategy. I think he was hardworking, definitely, and he got lucky. So the story of Best Buy is basically that they kept expanding, and it was just a pure muscle game, right? So when other chains try to take them on Twin Cities, it was just kind of this cutthroat, cut the prices, whoever was left standing did. So he eventually got really good at this kind of cutthroat competition, and basically he just kept not only buying, opening up new stores, but he was taking out the competition. And this was a time where you have to realize, back in the day, these were the 80s, that there wasn't really a national chain per se. I mean, we take that for granted here. We see Walmarts and Targets, even Best Buys all over the place. But back in the day, they were all kind of regional type players, right? So no one has really consolidated the industry. So when you think about it, how Best Buy ended up on top is that I guess they just had more determination, more muscle, and they just were able to kind of smoke the competition. And by the time all these chains were filing for Chapter 11 and the smoke cleared, Best Buy was the one that was left standing.
Best Buy was initially gobsmacked by e-commerce and then turned it around with its store within a store concept. Explain how that worked.
Well, the store within a store concept is actually not completely unique. It's probably unique in America per se, but it kind of, if you go into Asia, you go into these big stores, you'll notice that the vendors have their own little mini stores within the stores. So when Hubert Joly, who was the new Best Buy CEO, came into office, he got a call from J.K. Shin, who was the head of Samsung, right? And they tried to see what kind of partnerships they can work out of. So the Samsung suggested, why not we do these store within a store? So basically what it is that Samsung would carve out a specific space within the store, and it would be branded a Samsung Experience Store. They would staff it with Samsung employees. They would have their own point of sale, so you could buy the items and activate the devices right there. And for Best Buy, it really was a kind of a no-lose situation, because Samsung would pay them rent for the store, and they would provide all the marketing support. And also, Best Buy would get a unique sort of thing that no other stores would have, and they would also get the benefit of the traffic that would come into the store. So if you go into a Samsung Experience Store, chances are you're probably going to buy other things in the store. So it's just a good example of the overall theme behind the book, which was that when, like you say, e-commerce gobsmacked big box, right? People were saying, oh, big box is going to go out of business because they have all this space, and now no one's shopping there anymore. And then they still have to pay the lease on that, right? So the point of the book was, how do you take the space, which was considered a liability, and make it an asset? So instead of just selling cheap stuff like DVDs and stuff, you got to reimagine what you can do with the space. And the store within the store concepts was one of those great things. Like, we already have the space, why not add something special to it? Instead of selling low margin stuff, let's build a special vendor space for a big partner like Samsung.
And have they done that with other vendors?
Oh yeah,
they
expanded it out to Microsoft, which interestingly they operate their own stores, but they also have a partnership with Best Buy, like the Windows stores. They have stuff with Sony, especially with Sony TVs, like widescreen 4K type TVs. They're especially, and that's another thing that I thought was pretty smart. Like, if you want to sell TVs, I guess you could buy it over, online, right? But the space of a big box lends itself to the proper presentation of these magnificent TVs, and then you also need the expertise to figure out how to hook these things up, right? So I would look for them to do more. In fact, they have a couple of their own in-house brands. Best Buy, they set up with store within the store. Magnolia is a kind of a high-end kind of home entertainment type store that's owned by Best Buy, and that's set up in the store. And they also bought this outfit called Pacific Kitchen, which sells appliances and washing machines, refrigerators, and you'll find that as a store within a store with some Best Buy. So by the time you actually go into Best Buy, it's like a mall. You got all these different brands and vendors, each with their own employees. In fact, in the book, I think I talked to a analyst or consultant who kind of wondered, like, in the future, because regional malls are struggling right now, maybe the big box will actually replace the regional malls in terms of the place where you go to multiple shops and multiple brands within the same structure.
As long as you're talking about the space that these big stores have, how did Best Buy turn around their e-commerce by making use of the product that they had in the stores and pushing that out to people that bought things online?
Well, it's quite remarkable, because when I was researching things, I was thinking, wow, that's actually a good idea. Like, I wonder why no one really thought of it. But they brought in a woman named Sharon McCollum as their chief financial officer. She used to be a top executive at Williams-Sonoma, which is actually based in San Francisco, where I actually cover them right now. And she was particularly good at integrating the stores and e-commerce. So what they did was, in the past, when you sold product in a store, right, the product was stored in a separate warehouse. And when you sold products online, that had its own warehouse. So I was thinking, like, who really cares which warehouse it comes from? It's just still the same product, right? So the idea was kind of combine everything together. But when you take it further, big boxes are already giant spaces. They're already giant warehouses full of product, right? And some of it sells, some of it doesn't. They have lots of product either on the shelves or in the back room. So they're thinking, to make the store more efficient, again, reimagining what you use with that space, why don't, when someone orders something on bestbuy.com, why can't we fill that online order with a product in the store or off the shelf? You just pick it off the shelf, or you pick it off the back room, right? It's called a ship from a store. Now, a lot of retailers have done order online. You go to the store and pick it up. But this is a model where they're actually picking the products off the store shelves and shipping it to that online customer. So now instead of 1,000 stores, which Best Buy has in the United States, you can think of it, they have 1,000 mini warehouses, in the United States, right? And so you start thinking about it, it's actually quite fascinating because in the past, the stores were like, I come to the stores, right? The best thing about retail is like, location, 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 right? Best Buy already has the best location. So if the customer isn't coming to the store as often as they are, why not bring the store to the customer? They have the best locations already. So you think of something like Amazon, for instance, right? Amazon doesn't have stores yet, although they are thinking about doing it. You have the reason. Then you think about why they want to do it, because they have giant warehouses and distribution centers, and they rely on UPS to deliver that product to the customer. Best Buy has something, and brick and mortar chains in general have something that Amazon doesn't have. That they're closer. They're always going to be closer to the consumer. So now the race is on to say, how can I take that store and bring it to the customer, right? And so Best Buy already has 1,000 great locations. And there was a great story they told me. Best Buy, Sharon McCollum actually, it was like Valentine's Day. And believe it or not, people buy each other consumer electronics on Valentine's Day. Who would have figured? I thought it was just flowers and candy, but now it's iPods and iPads. So there was another storm out in the East Coast, and it kind of delayed everything. So Best Buy started getting its store employees to pick the products off the shelf and then personally deliver to customers, like whose shipments were delayed. And they were able to get through and inspire this. You go with the extra effort, it inspires this customer loyalty, right? So it was only something that like Best Buy or whatever, name any retail chain could do because they already had the stores. But if you look out in where I am in San Francisco, now everyone's picking up on this. They're started thinking, how can I just go to the store, get the product, and just give it to the customer? You got startup companies like Instacart that wants to go into, you type in a mobile app and you go into the store, they'll pick their groceries for you and deliver. And now, so there's a huge kind of need for this. The idea that someone will come to the store, pick the product off the store, whether it's the employee or an outside company, and then deliver it directly to you. And when you think about that, then you suddenly 1 day shipping doesn't seem like a big deal anymore. You start talking about like 1 hour shipping or 30-minute shipping. So again, it's like, how do you take the store now and bring it to the customer instead of trying to get the customer to come into the store?
Wow, it's fascinating. Yeah,
it's really interesting.
Everything is changing. Yeah. Let's segue and talk about Dayton. There were 5 guys named Dayton in Minneapolis, and they created Target. How did a conventional department store embrace a discount concept?
Well, I think it's really interesting about the Dayton brothers, right? They inherited the department store from their parents, right? It was this high-end department store. And again, back in the 60s, you think about the concept of the downtown department store. I know it's kind of weird now because they're not, you hardly see it anymore. But that was the thing back then, especially during Christmas, with the Christmas windows and all that. But I think the Dayton brothers felt like they wanted to carve out their own legacy, right? And they also they made a pact, if that's what you call it. They used to meet regularly for lunch or whatnot, that they would need to keep growing sales, but not just keep growing sales, grow in profit. They said that it was kind of a way of avoiding future problems when, family-run companies eventually start fighting. And they probably start fighting is when they stop making money, So they said we need to keep being profitable. So as great as the department stores was, they wanted to carve out their own legacy, but they also knew that the future was in something else because all the growth at the time now it's going out into the suburbs. So a little bit of a history lesson. I just like to tell this because no one really likes to connect the dots anymore. But when Eisenhower, this was back in the 50s, passed the National Highway Act, it was to create, as we know, the highways. But it was initially to kind of, in times of war, to move troops and material more easily. But it created like this explosion of the suburbs, right? And combined with the car, and people had a lot of economic prosperity back then. So you have money, you have cars, you can start living away from the cities more often. All these big booming suburbs built out. And plus the baby boom, right? There was a convenience grew bigger. So there was a need for a concept, a big box concept where they sold everything. So a family could buy everything they needed in one stop out in what was used to be the boonies, but now is where everyone's living, right? So the Dayton brothers, of course, heard of this, right? And they're saying, like, you know what? Even though we're like a high-end kind of little snooty little department store, they recognize reality that department stores aren't growing, and that the growth was out in these kind of discount big box stores out in the suburbs,
in the burbs,
out in the burbs. So they felt like, well, it's going to come sooner or later, so we might as well be on the we might as well be proactive about it, right? So they decided to launch their concept called Target, and in the beginning, it was kind of odd because they still had this strong department store sensibility, right? So, but like in the big box that they seen was sort of like, it was a free for all. It was like but the thing is that they decided, I don't know if intentionally or that's just how they were, to keep that high-end department store sensibility in Target, right? So that's why you hear things like, cheap chic at Target is just like a higher class of big box discounter than compared to Walmart. It's on purpose.
Target,
right? You go in, they, it's clean. It's a lot of white space. They have like exclusive designer clothing, right? And it's on purpose. And a fascinating story is that Target is notorious for running out of product. It really annoys everyone, right? It's like, how could you run out of bread or milk or these things? It's on purpose because one, the idea that they should have like product they can't sell and they have to discount it, that hits their profit margins. And they love their profit margins. But two, they say they don't want cluttered stores, AKA Walmart, Costco. They still want to maintain that sort of department store sensibility. So Target is what I would call the high-low strategy, right? I mean, its pricing might be higher than your typical Walmart, but it's still discount pricing. So there's a low part, but they give you the impression that it's of a higher type of quality and atmosphere thanks to their department store roots. So that's how the store Target came to be.
And I believe in your book you say that a lot of the merchandise that the Dayton brothers had in their Dayton department stores was also available at Target. So it was sort of an interesting strategy to carry some of that same merchandise, but I suppose at a discounted price.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was about, like I said, I think they were experimenting. I think that they decided how much they could get away with, in terms of what was the unique merchandise mix for each store, or things that you could find in Dayton's versus things you could find in Target. I think it was important to kind of maintain that customer loyalty that the Dayton store enjoyed, but at the same time offering something like a new concept that the whole point was to reach out to a new group of people. But also think about it this way, like you said, if you could find Dayton's merchandise in a Target store and maybe at a discount price, you felt pretty damn good about yourself. When you find, it's like you go to Nordstrom's rack and that the stuff used to be Nordstrom's, you kind of just edit out the rack in your head in terms of the name, right? You're buying Nordstrom stuff, at a discount price. So it's like essentially it's affordable luxury for the masses. That's what Target kind of pioneered, that sort of strategy. And again, the high-low sort of thing, right? Pricing on the low side, but like image and quality on the higher side. And that's the very unique position they carved out in the marketplace, and it's still so today. I don't see another direct competitor to Target doing the exact same thing, other than just other retailers, competing against each other. I still think they're pretty unique.
Target has done quite well with its limited edition designer partnerships. Lily Pulitzer, Missoni, Michael Graves come to mind. Explain why they went down that route and how that's been successful for them.
Well, I think we all start with Michael Graves. That's the story. And I think that the idea of Target is that they wanted something that would really set them apart from the competition, right? Again, this kind of high-end sort of expectation, right? And, their motto, expect more, pay less. So we know the pay less part, which is, the discount model. But what does expect more mean? Expect more means to expect the unexpected, these kind of, they call it delightful little surprises that, like, wow, I can't believe that you sell that. So when they've worked with Michael Graves, who at the time wasn't actually, he was probably a bigger name in the architecture world, but he wasn't a mass sort of quantity type name, right? But he designed this kind of homeware product, the tea kettles and all that stuff, the housewares. And
yeah, it was an architectural bent.
Yeah, with an architectural bent. I mean,
Right.
It was quality product, but it was only exclusive to Target, right? And it brought this really kind of high-end design sensibility to products that were still affordable to the average consumer. So that from there, they went on to things like fashion houses like Liberty and, like you said, Missoni, Jason Wu, to Lilly Pulitzer. And the idea is that you work with a designer, this up-and-comer designer. Maybe they're not particularly well-known to everybody, right? But you produce a limited assortment of clothing, and that's key, right? Because you want the idea that you better hurry up and get it because it's going to disappear in a second, right? And you just kind of bring that sort of cachet to the Target brand. And so it's I would say that it's kind of interesting you mentioned that because I think it's worked well for them, but I don't know because the last couple of ones, everything from Sony to Lilly Pulitzer, you have people lining up in stores and crashing their website. The problem with that is that I think they might be overplaying their hand in the sense that you create this rabid demand and then you don't follow up with the product because they're all sold out. People buy it and then try to resell on eBay. That's how we do it in America, apparently, right? But then it's like, how many times are consumers going to stick with that? It's kind of annoying, actually, the more you think about it, especially if you lined up and you wanted to buy it and there's no product there. And Target's very adamant. They're like, it has to be a very limited supply.
Limited, right.
If you limit the supply, it only increases demand. But then you just become a tease. You become someone who can't deliver on your promises. Now, I'm not saying they shouldn't do it anymore, but I'm just kind of wondering, how much of that can they continue to push, right? Because the Lilly Pulitzer, again, crashed their website again, huge lines outside
sold
the door.
Sold out in one day.
Sold out in one day,
right.
And it's like a flash sale when you think about it. But they put in, for a flash sale, they put an awful lot of thought and effort because these things get created out like a year in advance. I mean, it's carefully planned out, So I don't know how long they can continue to kind of pull a fast one on the customer,
What is the business model behind that for the designers? Do you know what kind of a deal they cut?
Well, I think it's because it's such a limited kind of assortment. I'm not sure if either side makes particular lot of money. I think it's on for the designers, they just get the recognition,
exposure.
Exposure. I mean,
right.
They probably are like Michael Grace. We're very niche before. We're not particularly well known, but an opportunity to work with like a mass retail that has a reputation of knowing what it's doing. So in the past, you wouldn't want to do a design partnership with Target. Everyone, they were like, ew, like fashion was like all snooty. We don't deal with the discount stores, But now because they've proven they can do it and it's become like cheap chic, it's become really in, right? Now they're jumping the chance to really broaden their customer base, broaden their image, right? But Target, again, it doesn't really move the needle just the sales because there's too small of inventory, but it strengthens the Target brand. But also, if you go into a Target store, maybe you want to buy something else, right? It draws like additional traffic to the stores. So just on its own, I don't think it generates a lot of sales, and I don't think it makes a whole lot of money. But I think kind of the ancillary benefits of it from both the designer and from Target. What they get out of it, I think it's something that you can't calculate. I think it's really valuable. Branding
and buzz.
Yeah.
Right. So let's segue to celebrities then. What do retail companies get when they pair with celebrities?
Well, it's, the thing about it is, I'm not sure if Target was the first one to do these kind of limited edition assortments, but I think they've really showed that it can be done well and they have a massive impact. So everyone started following them. So it's the same reason why Target would do it. If Target works with like designers, right, that are not particularly well known, then other retailers will try the celebrity route, like Martha Stewart at Kmart or Jennifer Lopez at Kohl's.
Kohl's, right.
You know what's funny? It's just a funny story. When I went back to the Star Tribune and started writing about retail, so I noticed that Jennifer Lopez and Mark Anthony, her ex-husband, both had collections at the same time, and they just gotten divorced too. I'm like, awkward, right? So, but to tell you the truth, I don't think celebrities actually, it doesn't really work. I mean, everyone from, because I think it's saturated. Everyone from Puff Daddy, P. Diddy, I don't know his name anymore, to, like I say, Martha Stewart, everyone has tried to kind of cut their own line, right? But here's the difference, right, between what Target's doing and the celebrity stuff that they're doing. In Target, the biggest brand, the star, is Target. Okay, it's not the designers, because you probably didn't hear of them. You go to Target. Target, the brand, there's only one superior brand. That's Target. If you go to the other model, the celebrities, the biggest brands are the celebrities. You know what I mean? And so you go there because you want to dress like J-Lo again, but that doesn't inspire a particular connection to Kohl's per se. You know, maybe the customer doesn't make the connection because Kohl's has J-Lo. Therefore, I got to keep shopping at Kohl's all the time, right? You're loyal to J-Lo. You're not loyal to Kohl's, right? And that's the remarkable thing about Target, that particular brand. They're the first company that made the retail brand the superior brand, the omnipotent brand, and all other brands, bowed down to it. That within the store. So Target, only one brand matters. It's Target.
Well, we can't leave Target without talking about the security hack. I guess 2 years ago now. So how did they recover from that? I mean, and if you want to talk a little bit about the hack itself and how they either didn't see it coming, didn't have proper security, or didn't alert the public soon enough.
I think it's I think it's more, I'm critical of them how they reacted to it, not so much that it happened. If you look at today, there's not another day goes by when another company said they were hacked. Let's go back to just hacking in general. I think that the only difference between now and maybe back then is now people are talking about it, because it used to be like a scarlet letter, you get hacked, you don't want to talk about it, you kind of, you're afraid it'll undermine people's confidence in you. So it happens all the time. The only difference now, people are talking about it. So I don't really fault Target. Maybe, could have done a better job protecting their stuff, sure, but then again, could have Home Depot and
JP Morgan
Chase.
Right,
I mean, we're talking about people with a lot of money, a lot of smart people there, right? So I'm not really sure about that, right? And if you want to get into the weeds, it was an interesting hack because they attacked it was like a subcontractor. It was like a janitorial services. It was a backdoor way of getting. So it wasn't a Target itself. They got it with their contractors. But I was critical with them because of the way they handled it. And I remember it's a fascinating thing, and I don't think it gets a lot of attention these days because people want to move on. But the story of the line goes, this was in the fourth quarter, it was in December of that year, their biggest holiday shopping season.
Right.
Greg Steinhoffel, I forget, it was like mid-December perhaps, right? The former CEO, he says on CNBC that he got a call on that Sunday of that particular week saying there was a hack, right? Okay, so they're trying to figure out what to do with it. And then on Wednesday, the honest thing happened. Target puts out a statement, not about the hack, but saying that, guess what? Holiday sales are growing pretty well. And that was essentially a signal to Wall Street. It was financial guidance. No one does that in the middle of a holiday shopping season to say, oh yeah, our sales are meeting our expectations. You're giving specific guidance to investors, right? And Target certainly has never done that before. And then that's when it got weird. So they put out that sort of statement. And then they get outed by a security blogger in D.C. actually,
Brian Krebs.
Brian Krebs, right? And so he breaks the story, and then the Homeland Department of Security or some other federal agency confirms it too, right? Target did not confirm it until that Friday. So now they look like what did they know? When did they know it?
Cover up.
Yeah,
right.
and then that they were pushed to now they're behind the story. But my question is, why did Greg Steinhoffel put out that statement, his name on that Wednesday, knowing that there was a hack and saying that everything was fine and dandy with their numbers, only to be totally outed the next day, and then it just seemed like it looked like they didn't want to talk about it because it's in the middle of the holiday shopping season, and if they said they were hacked, then people wouldn't use their red cards and sales will go down. Well, guess what? People got scared that they were hacked. They didn't want to use their red cards, and the sales went down, right? So it happened anyway. It looked like they were hoping to cross your fingers and maybe nobody would know about it until January, right? It was just so poorly handled.
So from your reporting, what types of skills make a successful CEO in an environment as volatile as we have today?
Well, here's the deal. I think that it's hard to generalize because I think that each company needs something different from the other. So, I mean, I take something like, let's take Best Buy and Target. I think that Hubert Joly is the right CEO for Best Buy at this particular time because he is known as a turnaround specialist. You know, he's known as a guy who will come in and struggling companies and fix them. You know, but what people say he might lack is a sense of long-term vision, like of strategy. You know, of where how can this? Okay, you fixed the company, so now what you do with it, right? So there are operational turnaround type of CEOs, which are good for the moment, right? But then if you have a company that's doing really well, like how do you take it to the next level? You don't want to like sink low and then have everything blow up in your face and have to start all over again, right? So that's when you need a visionary, right? Someone who can have the courage and the intelligence and the insight to see what's next. And obviously the name that comes to mind is Steve Jobs, right? So, I mean, he created wholesale industries. He was creating new industries that didn't exist even when Apple was doing really well. They could have just sat back and sold iPods and Macs till the cows come home, right? But then he decided, no, that was enough. He wanted to take it to the next level, right? So that's the visionary type of CEO. So those are the kind of the qualities. If you want to make the perfect CEO, I guess you want someone who knows how to operationally fix things and fix things go wrong, but still have the courage to look out in the future. And that's kind of the story when you think about a Best Buy and Target and retail in general, right? I think we take for granted that, like about online shopping, I could whip out my phone and buy something right now, right? We just take it for granted as it existed. But back in the 1990s, what is the World Wide Web, okay? What is the internet? No one really knew what it was. And then Amazon jumped into it. Jeff Bezos, another great visionary, right? But like it costs money to build that stuff, right? And how do we know if it's really going to work, right? So retailers at the time, they were making lots of money from their stores. You know, they're printing money. They were the only store in town, right? So why rock the boat, right? Why go into this weird internet thing when you don't even know what it is or what it could do? And by the way, you can't just say, okay, I'm going to do online shopping. You still need the warehouses. You still need how you're going to deliver the product. It's a lot of work. So you have to understand within each company, right, there are people who say that, like, I don't want to do the internet thing. I make money in my fine with my stores. And then when someone says, I want to do the internet thing, it becomes like this competition. It's like, you know, like you're competing for resources, prestige. And it's like, you're going to be wasting that money on that internet thing. And, you know, that's not going to be worth it at all. And so retailers really weren't sure how they kind of handle it, you know. And then when it turned out to be that was the biggest thing that ever happened, biggest disruptor that ever happened in their history. Yeah, we can look back at it now, that why didn't do the internet. But back then, they had something that was working. Okay, so get back to your original question. A CEO that knows that things are working, but what will work in the future? Do you have the courage to invest in things that might fail, but they might pay off, but you know that you can't sit still and just keep doing what you're doing? And that's what happened to retailers like Best Buy and Target.
You described the sledgehammer of e-commerce on traditional businesses, and that's what you're talking about right now. Who are the winners and losers?
Well, I think obviously the winners are, you know, something like Amazon, which has proven that it can sell just about anything to anybody, right? But I also think that the winners are people like Silicon Valley, like startup companies that can make the technology and software that can help brick and mortar retailers, you know, catch up. You know, like I said earlier in the conversation, you know, a company like Instacart realized that, okay, well, I'll develop a mobile app and I'll sign up a whole bunch of drivers. And if you can order something, they'll match the driver that's closest to your phone, you know, to the store that you want. It's very complicated. So they take into account weather conditions and traffic conditions, and so they'll go to the store and pick out the item and then deliver it to the customer. Someone like Ron Johnson, who used to work at Target, and he used to help found the Apple stores. He has a new startup company where he's doing kind of a personalized Geek Squad type of service where he will partner like with vendors, and they will deliver. His people will deliver the electronics to your door, and then only that, activate it and spend an hour with you trying to set you up again, bringing the store to the customer. So I think that the opportunity for entrepreneurial startup companies that know about technology and logistics kind of fill that gap between the store and the customer. I think those are the type of services are going to kind of win out in the future.
So Ron Johnson famously went from Apple to JCPenney.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Didn't work so well. Was that JCPenney just being the wrong culture for a guy like him?
Probably. I mean, you talked about what makes a good CEO, right? Ron Johnson's full of vision, but what JCPenney needed was a turnaround specialist, right? So Ron Johnson comes in there and he starts doing, we're going to do all these store-within-the-store concepts. Speaking of which, Best Buy, right? We're going to eliminate couponing, the discounting, the price cuts that JCPenney's customers have come to expect. It was a disaster because he tried to probably change a little bit too fast, because now you need to build a turnaround off of your core customers and before you reach new customers. You can't just shed JCPenney's image overnight, So those coupons were we're paying the bills essentially, right? But he wanted to suddenly he wanted to be like a fashion designer, bring the same sort of design sensibilities that Target and Apple had to JCPenney. But JCPenney is not Apple and JCPenney is not Target. It had it's a mid-tier department store, and people went to it for a reason. They were shrinking, but they would still have people going to it for a reason. So there's a great example. I'm glad you brought it up. Well, you said, what skills do you need in a CEO? Well, it depends on the company. What do you need? Do you need a turnaround guy to right the ship, or do you need a vision guy, right? Ideally, maybe you want both, but let's face it, how many of those people really exist out there, right? And it's just a wrong fit.
Let's talk a little nuts and bolts about the book. So you're a daily journalist. You write an awful lot of copy. How did you come up with the concept for the book?
Well, I mean, it's very synergistic, right? I always joke that journalists, they all want to write books. They just need a good story, right? So it was just basically I was covering Best Buy and Target at the Star Tribune in Minneapolis, and the idea first came out, there was scandal at Best Buy. We haven't really talked about that, right? That I broke a big story that their CEO, Brian Dunn, at the time, one day Best Buy says, he left, right? And most people assume that he got fired because he's a lousy CEO. And that would have been perfectly fine to fire him because he was kind of a lousy CEO. Best Buy was really doing poorly, right? But then, as it turns out, and I was the first to report this, was that he got fired not because he was a lousy CEO, but if he was allegedly using company resources to carry on an affair with a 29-year-old secretary, right?
At the company.
At the company, right? And Brian Dunn is an interesting guy, big dude, big mustache, didn't go to college. He worked his way up from the Best Buy, being a salesman. He's a great salesman. He knows how to sell things. He knows how to rah-rah people. But he was out of his element when he became CEO of Best Buy, right? So he had already a reputation of extramarital affairs and things like that. So it became sort of it looked like a story where they were looking for a reason to get rid of him, so might as well use that reason as opposed to, because that way that's Brian Dunn's failings, right? But if it's the other reason, which is that he's the last CEO, then you have to take responsibility for that, right? You're the one who promoted him in there. So then after he left, they did an investigation about his affair, and then it brought down Dick Schultz because he was the chairman at the time, and they said that Dick Schultz knew about what was going on but didn't do anything about it. I mean, that's what was alleged in this report. So Dick Schultz steps down, and then he comes back, says he wants to take the company private. So suddenly, oh my God, we got ourselves a full-blown proxy battle. It's a great storyline. I mean, as you can appreciate as a journalist, the founder of the company, at war with the company, trying to take back his company, and then and they have extramarital affairs and scandal and board intrigue, right? So it made me think, this might make a good book. But here's where it gets, we get real here. It's I'm not sure you could build an entire book around that, but is the story really about the scandal? Because when you think about it, and it's in the kind of the introduction, the first chapter of the book, it's not that it's on itself that's the stuff that's interesting, but what was happening at Best Buy was happening to everyone else in the retail industry. Their numbers were down. They were struggling like everyone else because of online retailing, right? And so the takeover battle and kicking a CL, they were just symptoms of a larger problem. Or there were symptoms of a culture that was under attack, under stress, because they did not know or couldn't or wouldn't know how to deal with the threat of the online world. So their symptoms just happened to be more sensational and more public than other retailers, right? Because the same stuff was going on in Target, the same stuff was going on at Macy's, right? It's just that Best Buy's thing was a little bit messier. So that's where the idea for the book came from, you know? So initially, you know, at the Star Tribune, I did this big project called The Lost Empire. We traced what Best Buy did wrong and how do we get to this point. So when I tried to sell the book, they told me, well, you know what? Everyone knows what's wrong with it. They want to know how can we fix it, right? They said, I want like a happier story, right? You know, it's kind of funny. We're journalists. It's sort of like, if it bleeds, it leads, right? We're all like pessimistic. Publishing world, with a few exceptions, is the opposite, okay? You got to throw me a bone, man. Give me some hope, right? So then it became about, the book became less about why did they screw it up and became about, okay, now what are they going to do to fix it, right? So it was my agent who came up with the title Rebuilding Empires. So instead of Lost Empires, it's like, okay, it's rebuilding empires. That's what the market wants, right? So that's how the book came about. It became, like what I said with Best Buy and Target, is that, okay, everyone says that Best Buy is going out of business, not really Target, but Best Buy, and because they have all this space. And so the theme was like, well, how do they take this thing that everyone says is going to drag them down and then use it to their advantage? So the book is divided into two parts. The first one was the history part, right? Because no one's really gotten into the history of Target and Best Buy. And I was like the first person with both retailers that they cooperated with a book. You know, it's just one of those things where you know about Target, you know about Best Buy, but you don't know anything really about them. You just sort of like, so I thought it was important to establish, and I think this is a key point with not only journalists but authors, that you got to give context, okay? I think we have very short attention spans, okay? Nothing happened out of nothing, okay? You know, there's a reason that's, you know, that has a series of events and decisions that has led us to this point today. If you don't talk about that, then you're just dealing with a vacuum per se. It doesn't really add anything, right? So it's important to talk about the history of Best Buy, Target, and because of the decisions and the things they did actually led to their situation today. So the first half was history, and the second half was, okay, now what are they doing about it, and now what could they be doing about it in the future? And the thinking behind it was that there's nothing really out there right now. You know, you mentioned me earlier that you love books that delve into companies, right? But think about it. It's like there are not that many out there, and it's just the publishing world's brutal, you know? So it's like you're not really going to find a whole lot of books dedicated to one company. Although I've seen books about Coca-Cola recently. It's on the bookshelves, right? So wanted to fill, like, so that, you know, like a void in it. So it's not just about a history of a company. It's about how our Best Buy and Target and Big Box are demonstrative examples of what's going on, how the internet has completely disrupted everything, you know? So you kind of, you know, start with this broader concept and you find two good examples like Best Buy and Target in the book. So that's how I kind of approached it.
Well, and you happen to have two companies who have really remarkable histories, and the storytelling that you've done in the book really illustrates that. I mean, one of them started out with the tornado, and the other one started out with a department store monopoly, and basically turned themselves around, and you know, were able to move with the times with e-commerce. So yeah. How many interviews did you do for the book?
Oh God, 20, 30, 40. I mean, again, I was helped out by, get back to your early question, that it wasn't like I was doing my job and then working on the book. The two are the same, you know. So the reporting I did as a journalist informed the book, and vice versa, the same. And I continue this. I didn't finish a book until I'm now in San Francisco and business columnist at the Chronicle, right? So I was still working on the book, but it was very synergistic because it was some of the columns I was doing, the interviews I was doing for the column appeared in the book, you know. And I used the column to also promote the book too. So it was a lot of interviews, a lot of work, but probably I had it easier than just an author starting out from scratch. And that's the advantage with journalists, right?
Right.
Is that if you're going to write about a book, you're like you want to write a book, but you need a story. Well, where are you going to get the story? You're already in the business of getting stories. So it's not like, oh, I do this left brain and this right brain. It's all the same, right? So you kind of work back and forth on it, right? You kind of like, it's all related, so you can work on the book while you still do your regular job, right? Now, I'm not saying it's going to work for everybody, but I think, especially as a columnist, I think that you have the luxury of taking the 10,000 foot view of things, and that can really kind of like, as I'm working on this column, that actually might make a good book, or that will actually end up a good chunk of copy and rebuilding empires. So a journalist has that ability to do that, as opposed to just a first-time author, kind of coming from the ground up. And it won an award recently. It won a bronze medal in a business commentary from the Accent Business Book Awards.
Congratulations.
Thank you. The only reason why I bring that up, because I was just at the ceremony last week in New York, and I was the only journalist there. I was looking at all the other winners, and they're all, maybe some of them, very few of them were like full-time authors. That's all you do. Many of them have their own jobs, but I would imagine that it's probably tougher for them because, like, in some ways, yes, they're building off their expertise, but they are, none of them have written anything before, or this is the biggest thing they ever did, right? And I think as a journalist, you're already comfortable in doing these things, you already know how to write, you already know how to meet deadline, you already know how to, kind of promote things and use the media, and so I think, like, I'll be honest, I probably had it easier just because of what I do for a living, But if you're a first-time author and you're starting from scratch, it was really hard just for me doing it, But if you're just starting out from scratch, it's really hard.
Well, and you were able to interview the CEOs and the top managers of these companies. Was there hesitation on their part?
Oh, yeah.
They have giant corporate communications shops whose job is basically to protect the CEOs.
Well, I have to tell you, they hated me. At one point and another, when I was covering at the Star Tribune, we hit some low points. My God, they both hated my guts. A lot of yelling, screaming, complaining, all that. It was funny because it was usually not at the same time. Oh God, I hope it wasn't the same. I don't think I could take it. Both of them screaming at me at the same time, right? Was one or the other. It got to be so funny because at one point Best Buy was going, "Oh my God, you let Target off so easy," and then Target would tell me, "Oh, you love Best Buy too much." It's like, are you kidding me? I said, I would tell both companies, you call the other company, ask them if I'm in their pocket. They'll laugh at you. They're like, ha ha ha, right? But I'm glad you brought up the question because I'm proud of it because it took a lot of work. Okay, they both hated me at one point or another. So how are they going to cooperate with the book if they hate you? But I'd like to think that, and maybe you should ask them, but it's that I earned a certain amount of respect. That number one, they knew it was someone to be reckoned with, whether they liked the stories or not. The number one thing you don't want a company to do to you is ignore you, okay? Love you, hate you, fine, whatever. You don't want them to ignore you, okay? Because then they just ignore you, right? But I think that they knew that people were reading my stories, that were breaking news, and that they were on like high alert for me, right? But then I like to think that fear kind of maybe begrudgingly became respect. That, I think retail coverage in general, I think it's kind of superficial. We look at the same store sales and all that. Yeah, there's no one like who really provides like the book does, like the history and the context about how we get there, right? I was using the jargon, I was asking the right questions, but I had a really broad, expansive view of what they were going through, and I think that ended up getting their respect. So don't get me wrong, Sandy. I was like sweating buckets. I was like, there's no way I can do this book without them helping me, but I can't let them know that, right? So. It took some negotiation, but I was able to get what I needed. Now,
how much time did you get with each CEO?
It's funny, with Hubert Joly at Best Buy, it was really only an hour on the phone, but I did spend quite a bit of time with them off the record and on background. They invited me even down to their general managers meeting in Nashville, where I met with them to kind of discuss the book and things like that. Target, I didn't really talk to. Again, Greg Stonoff was the CEO, right? And he doesn't do media, right? But they got me in touch with Jeff Jones, who's their very dynamic chief marketing officer. He's a big deal at Target, and they're head of their e-commerce strategy. over there, and they provided invaluable commentary and insight. And I remember when I went up to Target, especially Target was, well, both of them were a problem. But Best Buy was like, oh my God, they're going to hate me because of all the other stores they did. So that was a special worry. But Target was like, they just don't do this stuff. Until recently, they don't really even talk to the media, right? And I remember sitting across from Dusty Jenkins, who's their vice president of public relations, and I was kind of laying out the story to them. And she said, well, you know, Tom, we don't really do books, right? We don't do books. And so I was like, yeah, I know. So we were kind of talking, but then I said to her this, and I don't know if this made a difference or not. For all I know, she might have made up her mind to help me even before she had the meeting with me. I said, look, over the past few years, traditionally, you guys have been a very close culture, okay? You don't do media, and you haven't, you just kind of prefer to do your own thing. But since you joined the company, Dusty, and it was only been like 3-4 years maybe, when she's been there, it's like you've made a specific point to open up. You have a media day for now at Target in New York, right? You do more of these stories, right? So I said to her, this is specifically what I said was, why don't you take that to this next logical conclusion, and help out with the book, I mean, you're already doing it. You made a specific decision to be a more open culture, so open up some more. And I also told her, look, I told Best Buy this, I'm not going to ignore your past problems. How can I? I believe in a holistic kind of approach to this. To how do we know what the solutions are to your problems if you don't even know what your problems are? You can't just say, voila, they're all doing well and this is what we're doing, but it's like, well, what happened before, right? So I need to also focus on the past, but only in the sense of giving context to what you're trying to do right now to fix it and move forward in the future. In other words, I'm not interested in just saying, haha, Target stinks, haha, Best Buy stinks, you got a CEO who's feeling, no, that's the point. Who cares? I only care in the sense that, it's driven events up to this point and how and where do you go from here. So it was important for them to convince them that I was looking into the future. But at the same time saying that, but that doesn't mean I'm not going to ignore the credit card breach or Brian Dunn, right? But I'm not interested in just hitting you just for the sake of hitting you. It's about how did those events get us to this point, and what do you do about it now that drives us to the future? And I don't know, maybe they felt sorry for me. Maybe they just like me. Maybe the argument won. Who knows? But whatever, they cooperated. And I'm proud of that because, you know how as a journalist, right, if you get all this cooperation, I'm like, oh, you're in the company's back pocket. Trust me, Best Buy and Target do not think, like at least with themselves, that I'm in their pocket. I like to think they know that they're in some way I can work with, and that's the best sort of position to be as a journalist. And you earned that respect, you earned that cooperation, not by being a kiss ass, or not being like you're not always trying to come after them. You're just like they're journalists that just want to rip and tear. You have to meet that sort of sweet spot where they both kind of wary of you, but in a weird sort of way, they also trust you, I guess. So even to this day, I occasionally write about Best Buy and Target. They're like, "What is it now? What do you want?" It's like
Tom Lee is back.
He's back. I'm like, "Oh, jeez, did you move to San Francisco? I mean, whatever, But they still cooperate. They still give you interviews and things like that. But it's all.
You've alluded to this. The publishing world is very different than the journalism world. So how does a journalist find a publisher?
Well, if you're in a top-tier publication like a Wall Street Journal, they kind of come to you. You got publishers and agents all over the place who read the New Yorker or whatnot, New York Times, looking for great story ideas. But here's the deal. It's not even the publisher, right? You need an agent. I think number one, people ask me, how do you write a book? I think that's what you're essentially asking me, right? And how do you get it published, right? And the thing is, you need an agent. The publishers don't really accept unsolicited manuscripts. Maybe with a few exceptions, but it's mostly you need the agent to broker the deal. So it's a great story because when I wanted to write the book, I'm like, I have no idea how to do this. I did know, though, you needed an agent. So I went to Barnes & Noble and I bought a book called The Literary Guide to Agents, right? It's essentially a Bible about all these agents and what their expertise is, what they're looking for. So I started underlining things about oh, this is a good business book agent, right? So I started making a few kind of cold calls and a few submissions, but I got some interest. But the problem was that a lot of them were like, well, I like your idea, but I'm just too busy right now, you know? So I'm thinking they're not even looking for clients. Like, this is gonna take forever. It's like going through a phone book and trying to find an agent, right? So then the good thing about the literary guide to agents is sort of like a how to publish for dummies. They had a lot of tips, and I said, what you need to do is go to writers' conferences, because that's where the agents are. And it's like, in general, you know that it's always good to meet someone face to face and, you know, cold call them or something, right? So then there's a Writer's Digest conference in New York, and I think it was 2013, right? And they had this event called the Pitch Slam, which is kind of speed dating for agents, right? So you find the agents that you want, right? And you make a quick pitch to them, and if they like you, they'll say, send me a full book proposal, right? And I identified 8 of them. And the beautiful thing about this is that every agent in that Pitch Slam, they're looking for clients. That's the key part. So now you don't have to worry about calling a bunch of people not even knowing if they're accepting clients or not.
Right.
You know that the agents are looking for new clients. They're looking for new work. So you were scratched off the list. So I went to 8 agents, and it was pretty funny because you only get 90 seconds to talk, and then they give you like maybe 2 minutes of feedback, and then there's like a bell. So I really felt like it was speed dating. I was like, ding, hello, my name is Tom Lee, rebuilding empires. Ding, and they go, hello, my name is I was just like going through it. So I went 8 for 8. All 8 agents said they wanted a book proposal from me.
Wow.
And then I started thinking, I would have been happy with 1, and 2 would have been gravy on top, right? But then so I really felt like it was real good validation for something here. So I eventually got offers from 3 or 4 agents for representation, and I picked my agent, and then it all happened relatively fast too. And I was glad it did, because journalism books, you know, things happen. You know, you gotta, you know, even it took a whole year to do this, and I was kind of sweating buckets. That I was like, oh man, I hope Best Buy, Target survive by the time the book comes out, right? But he sold it to Palgrave Macmillan, which is a unit of St. Martin's Press. And getting back to that point, it is funny because events happen, they move, they change. You're a journalist, you know that they change. I was thinking, there was times where when I started writing a book that Best Buy and Target were both like not doing well. I was like, oh man, I was like, oh, keep it together, okay, keep it together until December 6th when the book comes out, right? And then after that, feel free to blow apart.
Fall apart, right.
And then I joked, if you fall apart, then I guess I have to add an appendix to the book that says, never mind, you know?
Or just a second edition.
Yeah, second edition. But essentially, the whole point of the book was how they are going to survive, you know? And like some things you just can't control. And that's the thing that you have to realize if you're a journalist especially, that like you're used to dealing with events as they come. This is a thing that essentially is kind of frozen in time a bit. Yes, you can make adjustments and things like that, but like, you know, it's not like a story that comes out on the web. This is like a bound copy, you know, it hits the bookstores. It lives in perpetuity in on Barnes & Noble shelves, you know, so and that was a big worry because I did not know what was going to happen. I mean, I joke about it, but yes, I was scared that it was like, oh my God, what happens by the time the book comes? Okay, they're probably still in business, but what happens if you know they're really doing poorly? Then the book is like it just seems out of touch, you know. So any journalist who wants to write a book based on what their current events has to be willing to roll with the punches. Let me give you a good example. My friend Maya Rao at the Star Tribune, she's on book leave right now because now she's writing a book about the big oil boom in North Dakota. Guess what? Oil prices are really low and the whole market's saturated, and now they're starting to lay off people. So I talked to her recently over Facebook, and she's like, well, it is what it is, right? And maybe by the time the book comes out, things will come around again. But it only adds fodder to the book because it shows you that the precarious nature of type boom towns, you know, like whether it's gold or whether it's oil now, you know, it's still good material,
right?
You know, but it's not for the faint of heart because, yeah, she had the same thought too, that writing a book about the oil boom that's probably be oil bust by the time the book comes out, but cross your fingers, you know.
So one last question. Where can one buy Rebuilding Empires?
It's widely available on Amazon.com, but also at Barnes & Noble. Barnes & Noble actually ordered quite a few of them. I'm quite happily surprised about that. Nice. But it's also available in various other kind of like independent bookshops, but also a lot of libraries too. But I would say like most books is Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, or you can go to the publisher's website. It's Palgrave Macmillan, and yeah, well, that's where you can find them.
Great. Well, thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
We have been talking with Tom Lee about the survival, or not, of American businesses in the digital age. I'm Sandy Johnson, president of the National Press Foundation, where we are making good journalists better. Thank you.